Good morning, everyone. Derek Rants is another YouTuber, and he puts together some good videos, and this is probably his best work I've seen. And the video is a song, and there's clips from images of news reports in Brampton, and news clippings from newspapers, and short video clips. And my goodness, talk about powerful stuff. Just because the song choice is interesting, the video clips and all of this stuff, this is happening in our Canada, and very, very, very poignant. I really, really like art that encapsulates what's going on so well, and the public feeling on it too. Like the song choice is interesting in that it's promoting diversity, right? Saying like, don't judge me because of the God I believe in, etc., and juxtaposed to this awful violence being acted out in Canada, in Brampton specifically, by men from Brampton or people from Brampton. It's interesting. And the video is very powerful. Link is in the description. Have a watch if you've got some time. Really, really, wow. And I think that the views are being shaped by YouTube as well. This like ratio is massive. One of my videos the other day had something like 100 likes and 12 views. I was like, really? Come on, YouTube. It's kind of, I mean, it's funny, except that it's not, right? It's scary. This is the article that was going with part of that video clip I was showing you. Domestic abuse caught on video in Ontario, police investigating. That was from 2 hours ago. This is, I mean, just incredible stuff. Here's more federal politics, and the violence is related to the federal politics in that the federal politics has potentially allowed the violence, right? The open borders have allowed the guns to come into Toronto. The gangs have been emboldened by the inaction of the police and the inaction of the judges. Now, yesterday I was talking, and I want to talk about this because my comment section was quite interesting to look through yesterday, and people were upset with me for saying it's not Justin Trudeau's fault. Now, listen, he bears a lot of responsibility. He's been in charge of the government for the last 4 years, but provincial governments aren't his fault. And that's more what I was referring to. Like, it can't all be laid at Justin Trudeau's fault because the BC government bears responsibility too. And I said it was Liberal and Green, but it's NDP and Green. I apologize. Thank you for correcting me. But my point is more that the electorate seems okay with this, right? Like, that's what I was saying. It's not just Justin Trudeau's fault. He is the leader of the party that got reelected on that platform. The electorate bears some responsibility. The electorate in the provinces for electing representatives who are quite happy to vilify another province, they bear responsibility. That's what I was talking about. So to be clear, that's what I meant by it's not all at Trudeau's feet. I'm not saying that it's not a lot of their fault. And I'm not saying that their policies are helpful. They're not. The federal policies are not. But the sniping between provinces, the Alberta, BC, all of that is not Trudeau's fault. The pipeline stuff, not necessarily Trudeau's fault. Now, a leader worth his salt would use the Constitution and push it through. But we haven't had a leader worth his salt in Canada for a while now. So here we are. We've got separatist Quebec. We've got separatist Alberta. We've got propane shortages. That's coming up next in the story. And we've got bad leadership. That's Trudeau's fault. But the sniping between provinces? Not his. So, right? And it all is culminating, again, back to the inaction of the federal government for money laundering, for the real estate money laundering, the casino money laundering. That inaction is inflating the market across the country. But if they acted on it, it would take billions out of the Canadian real estate market, right? So, double-edged sword. Do you want to kick off a real estate collapse? Because the recession is being talked about by a lot of economists. So if you start pulling out money, even if it's laundered money from the economy, well, potential problems, right? It's a balancing act. But the bad policies are to blame, yes. Trudeau fundamentally is to blame, yes. But there are other entities that bear responsibility. And that's what I was trying to say. Okay, here's the propane strike. Farmers dumped corn on the steps of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's constituency office in Montreal on Monday morning to demand the government do something about the propane shortage caused by the CN Rail strike. Here it is. And the reason they're dumping the corn is, well, here's a farmer to explain it. The wet corn needs to be dried. In order to dry it, they need propane to run their dryers, and the propane is gone. Here's a farmer to tell you why this is important.
To dry their grain.
I got close to $1 million worth of corn in my fields that's ready to harvest, but I cannot go and get it because I'm out of propane.
We understand what they're asking for.
$1 million worth of corn in his field, and he can't get it because he can't dry it, and if he gets it, it'll rot. Here's the article. Quebec farmers demanding immediate action to end CN rail strike took their message directly to the Prime Minister's riding Monday morning, dumping bags of corn at the steps of his Papineau riding office on Carmaisie Boulevard. Sorry if I got that wrong. Or Carmaisie? Doesn't matter. The strike by 3,200 rail workers has resulted in a propane shortage across Quebec, a fuel farmers rely on to dry harvested grain in their kilns. The sense of urgency around the week-long strike's ripple effects continues to grow. Quote, it's critical because it's exactly the time where most producers will use the propane to dry the grain, explained Susan Laplante of the Quebec Union des Producteurs Agricoles, UPA. It's been a difficult growing season for many of the province's farmers, and they're in the midst of corn harvesting season. It lasts for about 3 weeks to a month, but what happened this year especially, is that the grain is really wet. There's a lot of humidity, so it's going to take more drying than usual. It's not a normal season, and it's exactly this time of year that they need that propane, Laplante said. Pascal Leduc, a corn producer in Mirabel, was among the protesters and said that without propane, half of his harvest is still out in the fields. What's more, animal farmers use propane all year round, and without it, livestock could die off if farmers can't heat barns as the weather turns colder. Dozens of producers rolled into Montreal streets on tractors, chanting and wielding placards before dumping dozens of bags of corn in a show of anger and frustration. On Friday, Premier François Legault signaled a crisis, saying the province has less than 5 days' worth of propane left and that would have to ration that fuel if the CN rail strike doesn't come to an immediate end. As much as 85% of the province's propane comes in by rail. Maybe it's time for a pipeline, Quebec. What do you think? And that's kind of the push here as well. But really, I mean, if it's that necessary, if a rail strike will bring Quebec to its knees, and it is, then maybe you should have a backup that doesn't rely on workers so much, right? Maybe you should have the fuel being brought directly to the province. Just makes sense. Moving on, I talked about this yesterday. There seems to be a conservative push, and I'm not going to read either of these articles. I just want to show you. Ex-aides of Harper's are saying, that Andrew Scheer should resign and run for conservative leadership. And the knives are out. And it's interesting that, I mean, even before the election was done, since the writ dropped, I think it was like 4 or 5 days later, they had a Peter MacKay article out saying, oh, he's considering leadership. Like, it's very, very strange. So this is one, and this is Corey Tenick, and he's a former aide, and he's saying that being Scheer's chief of staff is like being the captain of the Titanic. And that's interesting. And these are social conservative groups call for Andrew Scheer to resign. So it's just an interesting collection of groups. And they've created this whole Globe and Mail article around it. And it just seems like a concerted push to push the conservatives off message. And it's the same stuff, and not the leadership stuff because they couldn't do that with Bernie, but it's the same style tactics they were using to push the People's Party off its game. They were accusing, and when you're being accused of something, or when they're saying weak leadership and all this other stuff, you're constantly having to defend that and say that, that's not happening, and here's why it's not happening, et cetera, et cetera. It pushes you off the game. And the coordinated push is just interesting to note, right? Like, I don't think Scheer's a great leader, but at the same time, I think the conservatives think he is a good leader. And so it's interesting that these articles continue to be pushed forward. And even if they found articles that were supportive of Scheer, I don't think they would be printed. You see how this works, right? Like, it's censorship by omission, censorship by highlighting one thought, one ideology, one perspective over any other. And the perspective for Canadian newspapers is that Scheer needs to resign. Did he do too well in the election? Is Justin Trudeau afraid of the next one? Get rid of that Scheer guy. Can't beat him. It just seems strange. Like, it seems really weird. And the papers seem preoccupied with it much more than our failing prime minister. Like, he's not bringing back he's not reconvening the House Parliament until December 5th. There's a giant propane strike shutting down Quebec. Any leader worth their salt would bring Parliament back and get something done about this. Not a pipeline, but something, right? It would signal that they care. It's just interesting, right? Forget about the failed leadership in Ottawa. The opposition leader needs a new one. Come on. It's so weird. Okay. Last story for this morning. Vancouver bubble tea vendors get 1-year exemption from straw ban. Now, I live in Guelph. Guelph banned straws last year, 2017 or something like that. And we got paper straws. And I thought, it doesn't matter. You know, paper straws are just as good as plastic straws, whatever. And then I had a paper straw. And it's awful. It's awful. The paper straws are terrible. There's a reason we use plastic straws. They're clearly better. And if we had a closed system to deal with our plastics, like an incinerator that is running currently in Brampton, and a lot of the Nordic states, Sweden and all of those, Denmark, etc., they incinerate their plastic so it doesn't end up in oceans, and they use that incinerated energy to power homes. So, I mean, yeah, it makes sense to me, but there's a lot of people who don't like the incinerator idea. Anyway, regardless, paper straws and these policies are virtue signaling, in my opinion, and I don't think they accomplish necessarily what we wanted to accomplish. Back in the late 1970s, recycling was created in Kitchener, and that gave the social license for the companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi to bring out plastic bottles. And because before that, they came in glass bottles and you got a deposit and you had to return them, and we didn't have all this plastic. Now, the social license that was given by the recycling has run out because of the oceans being clogged by plastic and that being a big problem. And we forgot that we already solved this problem, right? We already have a solution for this. We just aren't doing it. We aren't responsibly managing our garbage. We're instead putting it on barges to, quote, recycle it, which doesn't work. We send it to China and they put it into a river and that river takes it to the ocean. Really. And that only diverts about 8% of anything from landfills in Canada. So it's frustrating when the virtue signaling gets ahead of actually solving problems, which it seems like all of the politics in Canada, that's what happens, right? Like, let's virtue signal away, but forget solving the actual problem. We'll make it more expensive and awful, see paper straws, and, problem solved. No. Not how it works. Okay, Vancouver Sun. Vancouver City Council will vote Wednesday on a bylaw that will ban most plastic straws by April 2020. The bylaw calls for a ban on plastic straws, including compostable plastic straws, and requires that all accessible straws, the bendable ones wrapped in paper, be handed out only if a customer asks for one. If approved, the bylaw will come into effect on April 22nd, which is Earth Day. Virtue signaling! Yay, on Earth Day. Aren't we great? Let's pat ourselves on the back, Vancouver. I'm sure there'll be $1 million ad campaign to go with it. Makes me vomit. Back to the article. In its report to council, city staff recommends a 1-year ban exemption for plastic straws served with bubble tea in order to allow businesses to find alternatives. Quote, many residents consider drinking bubble tea to be part of their cultural identity. Businesses that sell bubble tea drinks were among the most dependent on plastic straws and are highly concerned about impacts to their businesses if they cannot find ways to serve the bubble tea that do not require plastic straws, the report said. Staff is also recommending a citywide ban on plastic shopping bags beginning January 1st, 2021. Paper bags would be required to contain at least 40% recycled content and would come with a 15-cent fee. The fee will jump to 25 cents after 1 year. Where does the fee go? Right? When we started paying for our plastic bags at Zayres and Walmart, Zayres and Walmart said, it'll go to an environmental fee because the bags used to be free, right? Now it goes to the bottom line. It doesn't go to an environmental fee. You know how I know? I asked the manager, I said, which environmental programs are being supplemented by this 25 cents per bag or whatever, 10 cents, 5 cents per bag? And the manager just smiled at me and said, whose do you think? And I said, Walmart? And they just walked away. And that was confirmation enough for me. Here's the plastic bags. Here's the fact that plastic bags are more environmentally friendly than cotton or paper or anything because, well, here's the article. A new study, and this is March 15th, 2018. A new study by the Danish Environmental Protection Agency concludes that grocery bags made of plastic are more environmentally friendly than the alternatives made of paper, bioplastic, and cotton, even if they're only used once. To achieve zero environmental impact, a cotton bag has to be recycled 7,100 times and a bioplastic bag 42 times. And here's the use of unbleached paper bag is equivalent as it needs to be recycled 43 times. A bag made of renewable paper needs to be recycled 45 times, and a cotton bag has to be brought to the supermarket and back up to 7,100 times, or around 20,000 times if the cotton is organic, to assure the environmental impact is similar to an LDPE bag. These things are interesting to me, right? Like here's another one all about bags.ca. And it says paper versus plastic. And it says the facts, the belief that paper is better than plastic is not based in science or fact. It is based on misconceptions about how plastic bags are made, how landfills work, and the incidences of plastic litter, and that non-biodegrading products are bad for the planet. Okay, so I find it interesting, all of these things, as well as interesting that people are okay with the idea of putting our trash onto a barge and sending it to places like the Philippines and China, but not okay with doing something proactive that other countries do, similar, like I was saying, the Nordic states, the Sweden, Switzerland, Denmark's, where they incinerate their plastics to power their homes, and instead of sending it to foreign lands for them to process, quote unquote process, right? Virtue signaling gone mad in our government. Gone mad. Ineffective leadership across the board. And, well, what do you do when the electorate's happy about it? Right? When the electorate says, hey, you racist, how dare you disagree with us? See how powerful we are? We've just elected all of these people. Right? What do you do? There's plenty of blame to go around, but how do you fix the problem? Because there are problems, and they are coming. And being ushered in quickly by city councils everywhere, right? To virtue signal away on Earth Day. Doesn't matter that it'll cost more and not solve the problem. Shame. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, and I'm on Brighteon as well. Today will be my first upload on Brighteon, so link will be in the description if you're interested in that. And I'm still uploading to Bitchute because, well, it seems it's not as terrible. It doesn't take all that long. So we'll see how it all goes. Thanks for watching, everybody.